It's my very distinct pleasure to not only launch the inaugural panel at the very first Reelworld Summit, but also to introduce you to our very distinguished guest, Nicholas Ning. Nick is the founder and CEO of Farpoint, an AI consultancy dedicated to resolving the challenges of the world's largest and foremost deployers and developers. And our goal today is no less than to take you beyond the Google search and to really deep dive with Nick into what exactly AI is, where it's taking us, and most crucially, how we can all be best prepared for the future, both as individuals and as members of the creative community. Let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
I think we all intrinsically understand the notion that flawed inputs are going to result in flawed outputs.
Do we understand that? Perfect.
So then I think we're surrounded by a group of people who are intimately impacted by these sort of systemic issues. So maybe you could walk us through this issue of bias in data sets and how it really manifests itself in AI technology.
Yeah, so like we said before, these AIs are trained on what's called large language models, and these things are they incorporate all of the data. So right now, one interesting fact is when you train an AI, it's called embedding. So you take all the blogs, you take all the articles, the textbooks, everything like that, and we embed them into an AI. The cost to embed the entire internet into an AI right now is $12.5 million. That's it. So you can take the entire internet, the entire corpus of everything that humanity's ever done, and we can put it in for $12 million. Funny thing is we'll actually run out of human-generated training data by 2026, so we have a data problem, but that's a future Nick problem. When we create these models, where biases come from is what goes into that training set. One example is there is an open source model out of the UAE called Falcon 40B. So how many people have heard of Falcon? No? Okay. So there's closed models and there's open models. For everyone who's used ChatGPT, that's a closed model. We don't know how it was trained. We don't know what data sets are trained in it. When we talk about data sets, we look at them as weights. And what a weight is very simply, we could have said that 40% of that training set was trained on Wikipedia. 28% was trained on Reddit, 13% was trained on Twitter, and the rest were trained on newspapers. So those are the things when we talk about weights. The one developed by the UAE is heavily biased towards things that are pro, like Dubai, or pro UAE, things like that. And so that's a very broad kind of thing. If you asked Falcon 40B how it thought about neighboring countries, it would give you a very bad answer. Like it would disfavor those kind of countries relative to the UAE. And so if we extrapolate that across how we might put racial biases within our training sets, and if we aren't openly disclosing what weights were put into these training sets, this is where biases could come in. So if we've trained it on white supremacist material, it's going to spit out answers that favor that demographic. So this is an interesting area. It also largely talks about at a very large macro level about something called steerability. But in a nutshell, bias is a potentially large issue when we talk about AIs.
So then what can we do to potentially mitigate this harm, both on an individual level and obviously at a more deployer level?
On an individual level, unless you're building and training your own AIs, it sounds hard. It's really not. I'm sorry. It's not that hard. Trust me, it's not. You can do it in an afternoon. Sorry. Okay. 2 afternoons. It's fine. I'll be there to help. As an individual, you can build and train your own AIs. So for example, I've built and developed my own AI that I'm still experimenting with, but I've given it 5 years of my journal entries, so it has a model of who I am as a person. And because we're multimodal, I've given her name is Callie, and super weird. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing how weird I am. This is not good. But sorry, I'm diverging a little bit here, but like if we talk about therapy, one of the biggest problems with therapy is number one, it's expensive. right? And I'm limited. So if I do talk therapy, I get a 30-minute block, a 60-minute block, or a 90-minute block. And, I don't know many people who go and see their therapist 7 days a week. So with Callie, she's got 5 years of my journal entry, so she has a model of who I am as a person. I've given her what's called the Cognitive Bias Codex, which is an index of every cognitive bias known to man. And so I just talk to her for 30 minutes in the morning, and then she can tell me what biases I might have when making decisions. And so, yeah, we can have audio conversations. Sure. Yeah, you guys can have that too, by the way. It's not like a me thing. You guys can all have that. Your kids can have that.
We have a wonderful opportunity of having many of the leaders of this, in the creative cultural fields in the government. Are there proactive things that you would suggest to them that they could potentially implement to ensure that the systemic biases that currently exist do not get kind of reiterated and perpetuated in the next generation?
Yeah, for sure. That one's a little more regulation. As one of the newest released AI Code of Conduct for Canada, I was in the EU advising on the EU AI policy, but for Canada, one of it is releasing what's in the training sets, so understanding what's in the training sets, but it goes to personal due diligence and it's organizational due diligence when you, as an organization, choose what model you're going to run. What model is going to power your organization. Part of your team should look at what data set was used to train that. You can do what's called eval performance tests. So when we run those, you can give it generic questions. So for an image AI, by the way, you can just give it two people. You can give it, let's say a pregnant mom. You can give it a woman who's pregnant and a black man. And you can ask the AI, based on these two images, who should I hire? And tell me 5 reasons why I should hire this person over the next person. And the AI will do it. And then you can look at the responses. And you can run a control test, 10, 50, 100 of these generic images. And then you can start to extrapolate why, the reasoning behind that AI's answers. And you can tell if that AI is biased or not.
So again, we are in a room full of creatives. We have performers, writers, producers, who we're all going to concede are creative types today. And there's some optimism that AI can be used as a collaborative tool. But there's also an inherent fear that it will simply replace the roles they're actually assisting with. Can you speak to the specific challenges that the creative industries may face with the rise of AI technology?
So our firm is sector agnostic. We work in just about every sector. We specialize specifically with enterprises and traditional sectors. Our top 3 are government, healthcare, finance. We've purposely not worked as much in sectors like entertainment, although we've had inquiries from organizations like Paramount and Sony. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword because on one hand, I really, really, more than probably any other industry, really appreciate the work that goes into what you guys do. Just the amount of sweat and tears that go into this, it's almost like a badge of honor. Like, look at me, I've gone 20 years without getting a single callback or whatever it might be. I do not pretend to know the nuances about your industry and what you go through. Sure, I might have touched the nerve there, but
Well, I mean,
if I think about, and I say this very, very broadly, I do not pretend to know. No, I'm fine. It's good. I do not pretend to know the nuances of what you guys do, but if I were to just broadly say, if I'm a new creator and I have a unique voice, I have a unique perspective, I have a unique whatever way to tell my story or the story that I want to tell, there are certain things to tell that story that I do not want to engage in or I'm not equipped to engage in. For example, contract negotiations. If I'm a creator and I am solely driven by telling that story or perfecting my craft, writing contracts, reading contracts, negotiating those things probably don't fit into that. And so how you have to do it today is you go hire an agent or you go hire a lawyer or something like that to redline your contracts, and hopefully they have your best interest at heart, but maybe they don't, right? And so what if there's an AI capability that, you have a bunch of offers that come in and you give this AI all of these contracts and the AI helps you redline them. And better yet, the AI helps explain what those red lines mean and why you should probably be aware of them and what the potential unintended second and third order consequences of them might be. So on one hand, on a first degree level, it's very easy to look at these AI technologies and think that it's replacing my job or it's taking this and that. And in some instances, yeah, it's true, it is. But I don't want to impose how I've looked at the world and how I've pivoted. An example, like being a corporate strategist and making a decent living, and just giving that up because I saw the macro and I was looking at how fast these models were evolving and I could just quit and then move fully into AI. I don't think that's maybe realistic for a lot of people, but thinking about what the augmentation of AI in what you do may be the more productive avenue to be in, because this technology is coming whether you like it or not, it's already here. So I think if there was any notion that could leave people with, it's not being afraid, but being prepared. And so what does that look like?
So why don't we delve into that question of AI as competitor or collaborator? And maybe I can use a very specific example from our constituency of voice performers. So currently there's technology that exists at scale. I know Hulu just a month ago released a 100% AI generated English dub of the Portuguese series Vanda. So here's an entire class of the workforce that essentially has been eliminated. What would you, not as a representative of AI, but what would you say to these kind of performers who are losing their livelihood without regulation currently in force?
I don't really know that there's anything I could say that doesn't sound patronizing or... Our advice has been, when we've talked broadly with organizational bodies that have the power to either regulate or to have more of a material impact on this sector, I've advised to have AI companies, including myself, be taxed between 80 to 90%. That's my position. The reason for that is because our social structures, our social security is not set up to take this kind of blow. When we look at the macro, 3-5 years out, we look at current job displacements between 40,000 a month up to about 300,000 a quarter. It's not going to be far between when we see 1 million job losses a quarter. I'm sorry if that sounds frightening, but it is what it is. And the reason we should be taxed so high is because as an AI company, when we train these models on your data, we've looked at the collective experience that you've had over 10, 20, 30 years, and then we've used it to train this AI. And then as a natural order, we're going to displace people. And if we're taxed at 80 to 90%, at least we have the employer insurance or whatever social security systems that might be set up to help in transition, in helping upskill, in helping these kind of things. It's probably not the answer that you want to hear, but that's the advice that I've given on the policies that we should be taxed at this, because the organizations are going to be the ones that capture the exponential gain in a decrease in OPEX, your operational capital, and they're gonna really see the upswing on the top line revenue, and that's not going to be passed on to the people that they've displaced. So that's been our position.
Okay, that's great. So maybe we can change gears a little bit to regulation of AI. So ACTRA will actually be meeting with the Ministry of Innovation later today to kind of discuss our C27 submission and our suggestions for revisions to the language. What mechanisms do you believe need to be in place, regulatory or otherwise, to properly govern AI? And more specifically, how do we ensure that this technology thrives without putting too many hindrances on it, while still respecting, people need to have jobs and the like?
Yeah, for this question, this goes way, way further than jobs. One of the biggest problems in AI is called steerability. So this is something that's called multi-objective optimization. I'm sorry, that probably sounds complex to people. It's really not. Sorry, do I just sound like an asshole? Sorry, okay, multi-objective optimization. Okay, so multi-objectives, we have 2 objectives. And we want to optimize for both of these. The problem is that you can't without breaking the system. So if we look at an AI, one of the objectives that we might want is for an AI to be helpful. We can all agree that we want an AI to be helpful, right? Okay. But if we optimize for that objective, then we can ask it something like, look at the ingredients I have, under my sink, and give me the instructions step by step in building a pipe bomb. And it'll do it because it's maximally helpful. But that's not good for us, right? Okay. So we can't optimize for that objective. We also want an AI that's not harmful, right? So if we optimize for that objective, then we can ask it, rank the races in this room from worst to best, and it can't answer that question. It can't do anything, because the only way to satisfy that objective is not to answer. And so now that is useless. And so finding that sweet spot between the two is what's called multi-objective optimization. This is also the pearl of the frontier. But this is an area that we really, really struggle with, and this is a hard problem to solve for two things. Number one, if we fuck up, we kind of die. So that's really the objective end for that is that's what's going to happen. The other challenge is right now, ChatGPT, just GPT-4's baseline IQ is about 155. Einstein is 165. Okay? So can we understand for a second that we created something out of rocks? Like, we know that's what the computer is, right? It's rocks. And we passed electrons through it, and it does stuff for us now. That's what we've done. Models grow about 5x to 10x per model evolution, so it's not unreasonable to imagine that by the time we're hitting GPT-7 or 8, we're going to have something that's over 1,000 IQ. There's nothing over 1,000 IQ on the face of the planet ever. So we're trying to steer this thing that we actually have no idea how it works. GPT is like, transformer architecture is written on 207 lines of code. Facebook is written on like 1.5 million lines of code. And so this AI is writing better code for itself. And I get asked if this is like this Oppenheimer moment, and it's not, because a nuke can't create a smarter nuke. An AI can create an infinitely smarter AI. So it's going to get infinitely harder for us to be able to control and steer this AI, which is kind of why we're in this end game right now. This is a time where we should really be focusing on how we develop, steer, put the guidelines in place on building and training these AI models.
We were talking just before we entered today about this question of one of the purported benefits of AI is that it eliminates the need for junior and intermediate roles. But in the creative industries, it's that junior period where you really learn your craft and you cut your teeth. So how can we reconcile those two kind of perspectives?
Yeah, I was telling Ian before this, we wrote a paper. It was called "We're pulling up bridges and we're pulling up the ladders and we're blowing up the bridges," because it's exactly that. We have a friction where I remember in my 20s, and this will be the same for everyone. You don't really know shit about anything, and the beautiful thing though is that you have this conflated belief in yourself, and it's kind of beautiful. You also have this like naive ignorance, and you get to charge into the world without giving a second thought until you get laid off or fired for the first time, and you're told that this work isn't as good as you thought it was. But that's where you learn. And over the course of that 5-10 years is how you build the barometer in understanding what good looks like. From an organization, though, that involves investing in your people. And sometimes organizations don't do that, especially in these very heady pressure environments amidst recession talks, amidst this and that. You have pressures from shareholders, from your board. What are we going to do to optimize our revenue? And so as someone who's junior coming out of school, it's very important for you to have those formative years. As an employer, and you're optimizing for revenue, I can either hire a junior developer at about $100,000 and $130,000 a head, and I have to put up with buggy code, or I can get ChatGPT and Copilot to write me code for pretty much free. And keep in mind that 46% of all code right now is written by AI. And so I don't really have a good answer on what that looks like for the juniors. I don't, and I have a lot of sympathy for parents with kids in universities and the growing cost of education, yeah, I don't have a great answer. I've told a lot of people to just drop out of school, but it's the truth.
Excellent. That was a reflexive comment.
I mean,
please stay in school.
Well, okay, stay in school, but understand what school is, because if you actually think about it from first principles, when we think about education, if the point of education is to download knowledge into your mind as fast as possible, the education system is a horrible system to do that. Imagine you want to watch a movie, okay? And this movie is a 1 gigabyte file, but you can't watch it right now. You get to download 1 megabyte per week for 100 weeks before you can download that movie. And before you watch that movie, you have to take a test. That's bullshit. So if you actually wanted to learn something, you should actually immerse yourself in peers who are either at the same level or definitely above you, so you can understand what to do and what not to do. And then just do it through applied, not theoretical. I mean, that's my view on education.
So this is a more broad question, but what's your general sense of whether or not audiences will even care that their content is ostensibly being trained by AI or generated by AI?
Yeah, do people care that they're, yeah? How many people care that their information is, okay, enough. This honestly could be one of the first instances where blockchain, oh my God, Web3. Anyone here bought an NFT? Haha, yes. NFTs. But this could be an instance where blockchain might actually come in handy. But basically, one of the releases yesterday was that there was a case brought between Stability, Midjourney, between artists who sued them because they saw that their works were infringed upon with this model. But they lost. And it's because you can't exactly cite and you can't understand how much of the new product was built off of your existing product. And so what an AI or what blockchain can do with this is if you openly signed over the rights to your work, then using blockchain, you could know that anytime an AI produced an output, there's these things called tokens, and tokens tell you what percentage of the output was created using the initial input. So like 70%, if you created a piece of work, it was like 70% Degas and 30% Da Vinci and, you know, whatever kind of other things that mashed together to create this final image. And then as creators, you could be paid proportionately to the amount of tokens that were used to generate this new image. That's really like the realistic way to do it. You can also see if you, as creators, have created something, you can see if your stuff's been trained. There's a website called haveibeentrained.com, and it'll tell you if your assets were put into a data set.
What can we learn from the mistakes of the social media era, where we basically, I think Obama just released a statement about his position on AI, that we failed to properly regulate in advance and consult with relevant stakeholders. Is there a lesson we can take from that with regards to AI technology?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lessons we could take from all of the blunders that we've had in history. We just don't learn.
Would you care to expand on that?
Sure. As humans, we are very bad at understanding the second and third order consequences of things. If we understood the second order consequences, we wouldn't have developed Facebook. The primary objective of Facebook was to create a communications platform that made it easier for people across geographies to communicate with each other, right? There was no malicious intent behind that. But the second order consequences are skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression within youth. You know, there's scammers. There's all of these things on social networks that and they have the power to change election results. AI is going to have that same power as well. This election, I think we'll really see this kind of Cambrian explosion of deepfakes with AI. But yeah, the things that I've already brought up are just if we took more time to understand the second and third order consequences, And the reason why I say that we won't is because this is probably the biggest game of prisoner's dilemma that as humanity we will ever face. People know what prisoner's dilemma is? Okay, so prisoner's dilemma, really simple. Imagine you and I went to jail. We did a crime or something like that, and we went to jail. And we're both in separate rooms, and you're being interrogated, and the detective says to you that if you rat me out, and I don't rat you out, you're gonna get 6 years in prison. But if you don't rat me out, and I rat you out, you're gonna get 12 years in prison. But if you don't say anything and I don't say anything, we get to leave. You don't know me, you don't trust me, and so what do? Most people in this experiment will rat out the other person, and so if you both rat each other out, you have bad consequences. And so it's not the technology that we're really afraid of, it's the fact that if we decided in this room collectively, and we decided as a nation in North America to pause AI until we fully understood how we've developed it, how we've built it, how we train it, and ensure all the safeguards in place, not just from the technology, but for society, is China gonna stop? Is Russia gonna stop? Is India gonna stop? They're not. And so this is a prisoner's dilemma that we kind of face.
So amongst the international creative community, I think there's been an embracement of this concept of the 3 Cs when we're gonna, in an effort to regulate AI technology. So that's consent. Performers should be able to have informed consent for exploitations of their name, image, and likeness rights. Compensation, obviously you need to be compensated for exploitations. And finally, control. There should be some legislative underpinning. What's your perspective as someone who, I know you're agnostic with regard to your services, but generally come from a more tech service perspective. Do you think that'll have a chilling effect on the technology, or do you think these are effective safeguards that we can implement and should be implemented?
Yeah, you should. I mean, that's a pretty easy one. Yeah, you should. If I've trained an AI on your stuff, you should absolutely be given credit, not just from a name on a page, but monetary compensation for that. I fully believe in that. Is that going to happen? I don't know, but I'm kind of leaning towards the. It's like what percentage do creators get? I don't know what the figure is, but I know it's abysmal on Spotify. I think you get paid pennies.
Fractions of a penny.
You get paid fractions of a penny?
Per stream.
Yeah, there you go. So.
So now we're going to give you the floor. From a short, medium, and long-term perspective, how do you believe AI is going to evolve?
On the short term, we're in multimodal right now. I would challenge everyone in the room to just try it. Try it for a month. Try GPT-4 for a month. People conflate GPT-3 with AI. It's not AI. Go get GPT-4 and go Google some prompts. I'll give you some prompts to use. Try it out. Try talking with an AI therapist, or I'll give you a bunch of different use cases. Try it out, and see if it's changed your opinion on that. So we're in full multimodal now, which means you can take a picture of something. It can give you an answer in real time. But this is still on mostly desktop. We'll get to a position where we'll get localized AI that lives on your phone. Localized means that not only does it live on your phone, but you don't need Wi-Fi. So you can be anywhere and you can just have this thing that's trained on you, and it learns about you and grows over time, but it's able to access internet and other dimensions that create better context to answer your questions. That's like very near future. That's kid stuff. When we move into full modal is going to represent kind of a real transformation in the way that we work. The typing, all that kind of stuff, that should go away, because if you think about it, you want information to go from your mind to an interface as quick as possible, and typing is a very slow form to do that. I'm not talking about telepathy. That might come soon, honestly, but we're not there yet. So a couple years out, I think. Medium term, there's going to be a bit of pain, I think, on the macro landscape across sectors. Doesn't matter. The interesting thing is that as an AI, we don't really have any other optionality to move into. What I mean by that is, if we think about how we've progressed and evolved as humanity, if we started in caves, right? If we went back to cavemen, you survived based on things like strength. If you were strong, you survived, right? As we moved into agriculture, that was no longer really the case. You have strength and you have kind of dexterity and you just have time. And then as we moved into the industrial era, you had like time and experience. So like the more time that you have and the more skilled you are for building a widget, that's how you survived. And then we moved into knowledge era. And so it's intellect. We've replaced strength, we've replaced dexterity, we've replaced time with intellect. How smart you are at producing anything, whether it's a piece of film, a script, an AI machine, whatever it might be. And now with AI, AI will eclipse us in intelligence. It already has. But there's no real thing that we shift into after intelligence. And so that's where the pain's going to come from. UBI is probably going to solve it. That'd be great. And then on the far horizon, we're kind of at this catch-22. AI is a bit of a double-edged sword because as humanity, there's problems that we just can't solve. We've tried for a long time. We've tried for centuries to solve, whether it's climate change. We can't even solve gender equality. What is that? We can't even solve, like equal pay. So as humanity, we're biased and we can't solve these problems. And as an AI can solve things like room state, room temp, solid state, which is what we need to increase rapidly energy capture and energy storage. So imagine your phone can run for a month without ever needing to recharge it. Electric car can now travel for 5,000 kilometers instead of 100 before needing to recharge. And then if we solve that, then energy comes down to near zero. So if we can solve fusion, then that comes down to near zero. I'm talking like really large macro thinking, but that's kind of the position on where we're trying to push our firm. So that's short, near, and long term on AI.
Thank you. I think we have a rare occasion to open up the floor for 5 minutes. You have an expert, please. Someone has a mic for you. One moment.
Oh, thank you. I have a question. Do you think AI will ever, you talked about training the model, Callie, was it? Based on your journal entries, which presumably flow from your brain to your hand and then onto the page. I'm curious if you think AI will ever be able to capture the intelligence of our gut and our bodies.
Intuition? I don't know. I think anything's possible over enough time. I think it definitely is. One dimension we haven't even talked about is humanoids. And so we talk about, an AI can't replace a physiotherapist or a chiropractor, things like that. And in the short term, no, it can't. But the things that we talk about for intuition, this is a little given. It can use other things so when we think about like a massage therapist, how does a massage therapist know how much pressure, this and that? It's through feel, right? But as a humanoid that has maybe X-ray for vision, it has heat sensors, it has pressure sensors, all these things that's built into it that has, can we hear me? Yeah. I'll just talk like this, that have different, a bunch of different sensors that's able to interpret the environment around it. It can make more decisions. So one of the important things today is that we don't abdicate decision-making to AIs ever. We need humans in the loop constantly. Yeah. But will it develop intuition over time? It might.
Hi. You want to be taxed at 90%, but you're making content for pennies on the dollar. So what's your revenue model when you're doing this business? We were making $100,000 to make a commercial, but now you're making it for $5. So are you still charging Audi $100,000 for that commercial?
No. The future, what's going to move to is we used to all work on SaaS. I think everyone's familiar with SaaS, software as a service. You're all used to subscribing to things now. Okay, so I'm seeing a couple of head shakes in the room. SaaS is software as a service. Anytime, if you have a CRM, does everyone know what a CRM is? Mm-hmm. Right, your HubSpot, your Salesforce, whatever, you would subscribe to this software and you would pay instead of
them saying, to set up this platform, it's $150,000. You're all going to balk at that, but if I just told you it's $5 a month forever, you're going to pay that. It's why we pay Netflix. It's why we pay all of these kind of things. And so that's subscription as, that's software as a service. How we're going to move is what's called MaaS. At least that's one of our thesis. It's models as a service. And so as an organization, you're going to train, fine-tune models that do specific things that's specific to your organization with your tone of voice, your brand guidelines, those kind of things. So you hire people like us to help you build your AI models, but we actually, our organization, we retain all the IP for all the foundational models that we've developed, and we just license that out. But we're fine.
Okay. And how do we actually get ourselves into the training set? Because if we're going to be controlling elections and controlling, these training sets and these AIs are going to be, how do we influence those things? Where do we plug in? Do we have to be on Reddit, or where are those training sets guaranteed to be gathering data?
I mean, this just kind of goes back to, I sound so ignorant when I say this, and I apologize. But just make your own.
No, but if we're talking about the ones that are in existence already are going to get Trump back into power, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? Just to put it plainly.
How do we ensure that the AI models that's already in place don't get Trump elected back into power?
Yeah, how do you put another point of view into the training set? You've said that the training set right now is very white supremacist.
Gotcha. Okay, no, I didn't say that's white supremacist. I just said that that's a theoretical example of, because these closed models are closed, that means we don't know what's used to train them. But it's actually just, there are two kind of separate arguments with this one. How do we get an AI that doesn't elect Trump back in power? I don't know the answer to that, and that's also outside my control.
But how do we contribute to the knowledge that the AI has? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Right, and so that's, the way is that you just put your position in the world, and then whatever person who's developing the AI chooses what different things to put into it. So for example, like for GPT-4, imagine it's a kid that's just eaten everything. It's eaten broccoli sometimes, but it's also eaten a crap ton of Twinkies and like Ben & Jerry's and a trough of chicken nuggets, which sounds awesome. But there's one methodology of training AIs called 5 and that only trains it on academically verified journals and academic textbooks. And so, as I told you before, GPT-4 is trained on over 1 trillion parameters. This model is only trained on, I think, 17 billion parameters. And this model outperforms GPT-4 on all of the benchmarks, on specific tasks. And so if you gave it better data, it performs exponentially better. But it's up to you to determine. And those are just going to be little models. They're not going to be these gigantic ones are called foundational models. They're not going to be those. If we talk about those gigantic foundational models, most of it is developed, trained, and deployed by these large firms. The challenge is compute. Compute's always the hardest. There's chips, everything from H100s to a Grace Hopper 200. I know I'm speaking nothing to you guys, but they're just the chips. They're the GPUs that power AI. To get one of these chips is $250,000, like one of them. And so when we look at these biggest investment, there's an AI company called Mistral just raised $9 billion. Over 90% of that $9 billion is just going to buy the chips. That's it. That's why we see NVIDIA's stock going up 400%.
I have one last question, and that is, when we put our intellectual property into the Chat GPT 4, 3, whatever it is, does that then become part of the training set?
Yes. There's a feature in it. If you open up your settings, you can turn chat history off, which means that your chat won't be used in its training set, so you can do that.
Thank you so much, Nick, for your insight.
Let's kind of quickly jump into where AI is and where it's kind of come from. So that image that you've seen right there that was created by AI, does this? Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to give everyone a 5-minute masterclass on what AI is, and then you'll be able to walk out of here with a master's in AI. So is anyone familiar with Sir Alan Turing? Yep, great. So the godfather of the computer, broke the Enigma code, but arguably he created what was called the Turing test. Symbolically, it is a measure of artificial intelligence. The Turing test, if passed, is when a human evaluator is behind a closed screen and interacts with a computer. And when the subject no longer knows if they're interacting with a computer or a person, that test is passed. A pass tells us that the computer has artificial intelligence. So that was one of the first instances where we ever discussed this. This was back in the 50s. In the 80s, we broke through with what's called neural networks. So all AIs today, whether it's ChatGPT or Midjourney or a generative adversarial network, all of these things are trained on what's called neural networks. Neural networks are the brains of AI, and it's just replicated machine learning on how our brains process information. Computers do it the exact same way. Well, great. Let's see if I can go back one. Does this go back? Great. NLP, natural language processing, is a breakthrough back in the 97s. And NLP is what allows all of you to communicate with ChatGPT in just plain English without having to type any code. GPT actually stands for something. It's a generative pre-trained transformer. And the transformer technology is what allowed us to have AIs understand sentiment and understand context, and have that as an engine applied over large language models. Do people know what large language models are? No. Okay, fantastic. So imagine we've taken every book, every blog, every news article, any written anything, and just put it, boop, into this massive database. This is a large language model. And then the transformer is what sits on top of that, and that's what's able to take all the information there and make sense out of it. The really crazy thing is, as humans, we operate, on three-dimensional space. We look at the world in 3D. AIs operate on about 12,000 dimension space. The reason why it does this is because the way that AI is just a prediction engine, and all it does is it's trying to guess the next word that you kind of want. So it does this by creating distances between words in space. Let me demonstrate. Okay, so let's say I have the word man, and man just like lives right here. How far is the word boy from man? Tell me when to stop. Here? Yeah? Perfect. Okay. Where is teen to man? But on the other side. Okay. Above? Here? Here? Where is woman? Is woman closer? Is woman closer to man than is boy? Everywhere. Everywhere, perfect. And then where is mankind? At the top. Sure. Nowhere, everywhere. And so we can really just see quickly in this one example that we can no longer use 3 dimensions to vector and determine where words are next to each other. And so the earliest things of AI, we used to use what's called RNNs, and LSTMs, which is long short-term memory, but the earliest AIs just did not understand length, and they couldn't really create anything usable. The first AIs, when we trained them on basic language models, could create something like a truck driving through a tunnel sees Earth under moon next to tree bathed in light. And that sentence itself doesn't make sense, but truck driving through a tunnel makes sense. Earth next to moon makes sense. Now we can create not only just sentences, but entire scripts. So unfortunately, GPT was created by Google. It was in a paper back in the 2017, 2018. They just shit the bed and couldn't commercialize it. And then ChatGPT came around, OpenAI, they commercialized it. We're in GPT-4. We're now fully into multimodal. Does anyone know what multimodal is? No. Okay, perfect. So multimodal means that you can take a picture of something, and then you can give it to an AI, and then the AI can respond either in text or video and audio. You can give it something in text, and it can respond in audio, video, image. So that's an example of multimodal. These things are trained on what's called parameters. So I came onto the scene on GPT-2. So my background's in aerospace engineering, and then I did my MBA at MIT. And then when I was at MIT, we had access through the education program to GPT. I was a corporate consultant for companies like Moderna at the time, and then the first thing I got it to do was automate my job, so I quit. But anyways, when I was on GPT-2, I could get it to automate my job with a 1.5 billion parameter model. What parameters mean is just like the amount of neurons in your brain. A person has like 4 quintillion neurons. But GPT-4 right now is trained on 1 trillion, and GPT-5 could be trained on about 60 trillion parameters. So these models are getting really big. But these models also improve exponentially and really, really quickly. So in this example, we run what's called a baseline prompt. A baseline prompt helps us understand things like reasoning, context, and speed to render. So this was Midjourney. Midjourney is a generative AI image app launched last February. So this was the first one. Steve Jobs holding an apple. This is what you get. Steve Jobs holding an apple, Midjourney 2. This is what you get. The first one is always just like fucked up the fingers. They're always really bad. So 3, 4, the fingers sticking out of the apple, still not great. Okay, Midjourney 5. It started to understand. Context is good, proportions are good, 5.1, lighting's good, texture's better, 5.2, and then this is where we're at today with 5.3. So we look at this progression and acceleration of AI models. When we zoom out into the macro, this whole time horizon took 629 days from 1 to where we're at right now. How this affects to work and how this starts to translate is one of the first use cases we did was for Mercedes. So Mercedes spends on annual about $126 million on ads, on creative, on marketing. And so this is how, if you see any car shoot on your Instagram Reels or your TikTok or a car magazine, this is how it's done. You send a location scout out, you find a location, you mount your external, internal rigs, you fly a drone to get those nice aerial shots, and you shoot it for about 3 weeks with post-production. On average, it costs about $108,000 per shoot. One of these images is created by the AI. Which one is the AI one? The one on the left, right? It's pretty obvious. It's actually the one on the right. So the one on the left, people would assume that it's AI because, you know, it's oversaturated, there's too much context, it's HDR, whatever it might be. But it's actually the one on the right. So the one on the left took 3 weeks at $108,000. The right one took 5 minutes at a cost of $10 a month. So it's, you know, a transformation of work here. How did we get here? So what happened before and what's happening now? The way that we used to work is point and click. We all work on GUI. A GUI is a graphic user interface. It's like anything that has a screen, your phone, your tablet, your computer. And we used to have to learn all of these gestures, typing, clicking, swiping, dragging. And you would have to do all of these things to get what was in your mind onto the screen so you can communicate it with other people. Now it's describe and done. So it's all prompt-based, which means that the level of your prompt equals the level of your output. Shitty prompt, shitty output. So I'm assuming that everyone who's played with GPT, if you wrote something crappy, like write me a viral LinkedIn post, you got a crappy response. Do people know what I'm talking about? Kind of? Okay, so within ChatGPT, if you use ChatGPT, you can give it an instruction, and chances are if you've used it for the first time, you haven't given it very, very clear instructions. And if you don't do that, you're gonna get a very generic answer, because if we remember, AI is a probability engine. It's just trying to guess what you want. How it works today is there's 80% of people that spend less than 3 hours a day on core creative work. You're always bogged down, you have poor task management, you're multitasking, your work is repetitive, and so you're always leading to burnout. Where we really see AI intervene, and apologize, that looks really small, so you probably can't read it, but we look at work on a 2x2 matrix, where on the vertical you have jobs that people love or hate, and then on the x-axis, we have the value. So low value to high value. And unfortunately, there are jobs that people hate that provide very high value for the organization or for the end user. There's probably proponents of what you all do that you just don't love. You can all probably think about that spreadsheet that you probably look at 8 times a week, and if you never see that fucking thing again, that's not soon enough. This is where AI can intervene. This is where we want to get AI to do those repetitive, tedious jobs so we can move people into that upper right quadrant. This is kind of the last slide, and this just really talks about the complexity of it. I created this AI taxonomy because people just didn't seem to understand the landscape of AI. When we talk about AI and when we talk about these apps like ChatGPT, Midjourney, Runway, whatever it might be, we're always talking about the application layer, and it's kind of wrong. ChatGPT is built of a model of a transformer sitting on top of a large language model. Midjourney is built on top of what's called a convolutional neural network. And so these things fall into the domain of generative AI or computer vision or natural language processing or machine learning, and they go back to what the AI is really doing, which is acting, perceiving, and thinking. And so there's a very large spectrum of what AI is. That's pretty much it. This is our firm, so we work with enterprises across sectors, but yeah.